Hello and welcome to OK Universe, What Now? This is a podcast for those of you who have felt an awakening and then crickets. Or where was that state of bliss that I was promised when I met my spiritual awakening? Hi and welcome to another episode of OK Universe, What Now? With me, Lina Della Luna, and I am here to unpack the messiness that is often after the spiritual awakening. Bliss has faded. And this week, I want to talk to you about modalities. So we spoke a little bit last time about my own personal journey. Thank you again for holding that space for me. And also about how we can kind of get overwhelmed when we realize that it's not all just love and light after we have our awakening. Now, I knew I needed a spiritual practice. I had dabbled with various things over the years, such as using cards, a little bit of meditation, but nothing really concrete. And I realized I needed a routine. Delving into Moonology with Yasmin Boland, I started to put in place the importance of having a morning routine and an evening routine. We are cyclical beings. Our circadian rhythms wants to work beautifully with the rising of the sun, and then its setting, and then the rising of the moon. Now, when you look at putting in morning and evening routines, this can really stabilize your circadian rhythms. It can also make life a little bit easier, to be honest. When the winter comes in and none of us really want to get out of bed in the morning, if we have a good routine, this can really help us. I started to put in getting up in the morning, sitting and having a bit of a meditation, making sure my alarm was set at the same time every day so my body clock really set in tune. I was also being mindful about the evening, trying not to go to bed too late, having a wind down in bed that didn't involve my mobile phone. Not sure how well that went, particularly if there was a crystal sale going on late. And all of a sudden, I was finding other practitioners on Instagram. And all of a sudden, I am learning about human design and crystal healing and psychism and tarot and astrology. And that's quite overwhelming. One of the problems we end up with is we kind of feel like we need to start taking on spiritual modalities, but we end up seeking external teachers and solutions. And there are so many, and we also maybe have a desire to try them all. I'm a Gemini rising. I love, love, love information. I love to learn constantly. So I was learning about all these amazing things and I just wanted to do them all. I couldn't get enough of workshops and programs and books about all these different modalities. And quite honestly, it was chaotic in a way, going through and going, oh, wow, I want to learn that. And wow, I want to learn that. Actually took a lot of time and a lot of money. And I really had to slow myself down to let's just focus on one thing with one teacher at the time. Now, alongside the Moonology, it made sense for me to start looking at astrology. And this was something I'd really had an interest in my teenage years. Whenever my parents would buy the Sunday papers that came with a glossy magazine, I would always grab that first and turn to the back and look for Mystic Meg's horoscope. And I'd always been intrigued by the planets and their archetypes and energies. And that was something that had always stayed with me. I just kind of didn't do anything about it, bar read my horoscope every now and then. And here it made total sense for me to study the moon, but also look at the context of the planets around her. So astrology became instantly a draw for me. It was like going back to a first love. And I found some incredible teachers that really helped pave the way for the work I do now as an astrologer. But I also ended up taking a few classes because I kind of felt like I should. Oh, but if I'm doing that, then surely I have to learn this too. And maybe getting a little sucked in with certain teachers almost being put on a pedestal. 2020, 2021, Instagram was this place of distractions, chaotic distractions. And I remember getting really into crystals, loving looking up the science behind them, because yes, folks, there is some science with crystals. But instead of just embracing the fact that I really liked them and I enjoyed them and I like working with them, I decided I needed to study as a crystal healer. So I signed up for the course, quite an expensive one, and started to study to be a crystal healer and brought all of my working crystals and, blankets to lay people on and really kind of got in there going, yes, this is it. I'm going to be a moonologer and a crystal healer. However, what was interesting in that course is we were buddied up and I thought I had two lovely buddies, but they actually worked a lot faster than me. And in late 2021, the wedding industry opened up again, and all of a sudden, I had the equivalent of over a year's worth of work in about 4 months to get through. And so I had to step away from our regular study. And unfortunately, my buddies just disappeared. They got their certificates and started working, and neither of them said, are you okay? Are you aren't really working on this, or have you managed to get through to the part where you're practicing on people? Nothing. I didn't hear anything from either of them apart from hearing of them passing, which of course I was super happy with them about. But I felt a little bit abandoned. And so that was another point in my awakening journey where actually this wasn't all bliss or love and light. This was actually a bit disappointing. The reality is now, though, when I look back, is maybe I jumped into that course. Maybe I just needed to play rather than study straight away. And I feel like I see this over and over again with people. Like if you find a modality you love, you can just enjoy it. It doesn't then have to become something you study or something you then have to offer. So that was an important lesson early on. I've still not finished my crystal healer. I like to think that I would finish it sometime. But the reality is that as I tried various modalities, a couple really stood forward as the ones that felt soul-led to me. So I ask you a question. What feels soul-led to you? What modality have you tried that feels like you've been doing it for lifetimes? What modality brings you absolute joy, even if no one else you know practices it? What modality makes you feel safe and rooted? And what modalities feel like a passing phase? It's perfectly okay to let those ones go. It's funny, I was in a psychic mediumship reading once. I will undoubtedly talk about my psychism and mediumship training on this podcast, but I was sitting for a fellow student, not one that I'd met before, but a student of the same teacher. And my guides had come through, and all of a sudden she said, there's a course you haven't finished, and they're telling you it really doesn't matter if it doesn't happen. And hearing that made me feel seen by dead people. It really made me feel seen, and it was like, it was like a massive breath of fresh air. And like I said, who knows if I'll come back to that. I still work myself with the principles, many principles of crystal healing, and I will recommend certain crystals for clients sometimes if I feel like they need some support in that way. So the knowledge is there. but I'm not yet practicing it. And who knows? Maybe I never will. And that's okay. But there is an emotional cost to jumping from modality to modality to modality. We need to slow down a little and hone in, as I said, on what feels right, what feels like we could have been doing in a lifetime. And for me, whilst Moonology was initially that 100% all in, as did the following of the astrology, and I went back to picking up tarot cards and studying tarot too. And those three things immediately felt like coming home, like I'd been doing it for centuries. Whereas I didn't get that from the crystal healer. I took a workshop on human design, very fascinating, but I knew this was something I was going to set aside. So self-doubt, I think, can be stoked when we jump from something to something to something, and we don't really allow ourselves to really bed in to what it is that we are working on or studying. Because that when we get really deep and into something, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing because we let it envelop all of us. We let it sink into our skin. I still get so excited looking at the moon and knowing what phase she's in and finding out someone's rising sign and doing a moonology chart. I love astrology. I know there is still a great debate over astrology, and I don't care because I love it. And I see it as much more as something we can work in or work with subconsciously, regardless of whether we believe it or not. You know, I could say to you, oh, the moon is in Cancer, therefore this, and this. And you might be like, I'm not sure about this astrology stuff. But I could then just say to you, have you thought about why you might be doing things this way without mentioning astrology at all? And you'll be like, oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't care if there is a placebo involved. And I actually feel like that about crystals as well. If working with a crystal makes you feel great, who cares about whether it is fundamentally scientific or not? But by the way, it is. Who cares if we don't have a fundamental scientific reason for astrology and for whether the planets as archetypes can affect us? Who cares if it makes you feel good? Who cares if it helps you ask yourself questions or delve into things? Now, astrology will never define who you are, but it can open up those layers. And when we open up those layers, we discover more. So how can that be a bad thing? I love tarot and oracle cards as a way of eking out our own intuition. I always say, if I read to you, I am the conduit. It is my intuition, my connection that is pulling down what it is that you need to hear. And when I say I, by the way, I am not saying that's exclusively me as a reader. All great readers are intuitive conduits for you. And this is a wider subject to go into at a later date, but this is why I urge you not to get sucked in by things like AI tarot readings. Because the AI will only go on reading lots of the kind of, and I'm doing quote marks here for those of you that are listening, official meanings. I say fuck official meanings. I read based on my intuitive message of what you need to hear. And that could be completely different to what a guidebook says the Four of Cups means. I don't care, because I am an intuitive and you get the message that I have to tell you right then. But anyway, I digress. We will come to AI guidance, I'm sure, at some point, because we can't get away from it, right? So let's be honest with ourselves. Let's have a think about what in that initial era of bliss, I've awakened, I've found the universe, this is all amazing, everything's love and light, and I'm opening my heart out and it's beautiful. But what in that time did you think, I have to do that, I have to learn that, I must do this, I must buy this? That actually it's perfectly fine to let just slip away now. All these modalities can be a distraction, almost like a form of spiritual bypassing. Because the best modality you will ever work with is just going inside and asking yourself deep questions. And we can avoid that by saying, oh, I'm going to do it with crystals. Oh, I'm going to do it with tarot. Oh, I'm going to look at my astrology chart and it says I can't do that or I won't be like that. Therefore, oh, well, never mind. It's spiritual bypassing, right? I realized that the fundamentals of my spiritual practice had to come from within me. It had to come from the place that felt soul-led, like I'd been living many, many lives building up the knowledge. So your practice will change. There will be modalities that come and go, and that's fine. But don't ever think you can't let something drop away that doesn't feel like it's meant to be for you. There's no shame in admitting that you jumped into something quickly because everyone else was. I go on Vinted now and I see hundreds and hundreds of crystals for sale. And I would be very, very sure that many of those towers, small towers and pebbles were bought in 2020, 2021. And again, that's fine. Okay. Don't mistake what I'm saying for judgment, by the way, because it's not. But we move on as our spirituality progresses. We really start to find in ourselves what it is that we're supposed to connect to. A big part of my practice now is shamanic work. If you'd said to me in 2020, oh, you're going to go down the shamanic route, I would have gone, say, what now? The experience I'd had with a shaman up until that point was a beautiful ceremony I felt called to attend / drag my husband to in Mexico in 2017. I don't know why I wanted to go to this ceremony in the forest, but I felt like I had to do it. And I can go back ticking off things that I realized was actually the little points on the journey to awakening fully. And I love that, but I wouldn't have realized it straight away, that it was all connected. The other thing I want to make clear is that a spiritual practice doesn't have to be rigid. If you've started your morning and evening routines and they start to drop off, that's okay. Don't get annoyed with yourself because maybe they are evolving. We also, coming back to seasonal living and circadian rhythms, need more sleep, for example, in the winter. So if your routine throughout the summer is getting up with the sunrise at 5 a.m. and meditating for an hour before enjoying a lovely cup of green tea and journaling to set yourself up for the day, which is lovely, don't be surprised if you can't do that in December when it's still the dead of night outside. Your body needs more rest in the winter. So it's perfectly okay to just adapt and adapt over the years to what it is you do and don't need anymore. It's also important to have boundaries for yourself. Spirituality is a journey of constant self-discovery. So if you start to bring in a rigidity, I must be doing this, then you're almost breaking a boundary for yourself. And it will get harder and harder to keep up that practice. Gentle reflection on all of this is something to do regularly. We don't force anything. It has to come from here, from your heart. A major thing to build into your own practice is the ability to say no without guilt, having your own boundaries for yourself. Being able to say, no, it's raining and dank and dark outside and I am not going to get up with the sunrise and meditate for an hour. I am going to enjoy snuggling in my very warm bed next to my beloved or with my cats or my dog, and I'm going to enjoy this rest because this is what I need right now. So I really hope that my little riffing here on modalities and finding out what doesn't work for you, and it is a little riff. I want to avoid having scripts for these podcasts. Of course, that may need to be revisited if you all start saying to me, Lina, you're waffling. And please do if you think so. Again, I would love to hear if any of this resonated with you. If from what I've said, you feel like you could drop something now, or if you've had a realization over something, please let me know. You can get in touch either by leaving a comment wherever you're listening to this podcast or on YouTube, or you can drop me a message either at Lina Della Luna on Instagram, or I now have a okuniverse_pod Instagram too. So I'd love for you to let me know how this resonated. Let me know if any of this makes sense to you. And then I look forward to seeing you for episode 3. I mentioned before that your awakening was just an invitation. So let's tackle the biggest lie in the spiritual community and let's bust the love and light myth. Please, if you've enjoyed this podcast, do share it with someone who you think would also benefit from listening in. And also, please do rate or review the show. That really helps getting it out to other people. So with that, with my love and moon magic, see you.